Welcome to No BS Basics Python Edition. I'm assuming you've installed some sort of text editor and set it up for Python coding. If you haven't, I'll link a video below and you can come back when you're ready to learn. In this series, we're getting straight into learning Python fast. If you just want to learn Python quick or if you're cramming for a class, this series is perfect for you. Remember, for anyone that's having trouble keeping up with the pace, you can always rewind the video and relearn so you can understand the material better, and that's very important. Today, we're covering 3 essentials in Python that will be used in all of your programs or probably will appear on some of your tests if this is for a class. Variables and data types, input and output, and string manipulation and formatting. First up, variables and data types. A variable is just a name that stores data. Think of it like a labeled box. You can name them anything, but it's best to name them something relevant to what the variable is storing. For example, if you're creating a game and you need a variable to store an enemy's health, you want to name that variable enemy health instead of a random combination of letters, just to make it a lot easier for you to understand what your program is actually doing and make it just easier for you to code in general. Variables within a program cannot have the same name and are case sensitive, which means upper and lower cases are considered different. So for example, a lowercase x variable name will be different from an uppercase x variable. These will be 2 different variables. Variables can store many different types of data, known as data types. For example, integers, floats, which are just decimals, strings, which are just characters you put between 2 quotation marks, and booleans, which store true or false. So to declare and initialize a variable, you can have the variable name, the assignment operator, a single equal sign, and then the value you're storing, which can be, as we covered, integers, floats, strings, it's a bit too long, and booleans. Just make sure that for a boolean, you want to have this first letter capitalized. Now, Python is a dynamically typed language, which in simple terms means that you don't have to tell the computer that this is an integer or this is a float. It already knows it. If you ever forget the data type of a variable, so if you're ever asking yourself, what is this data type? What data type is y storing? Well, you can use the print function, which I'll get into more here. You don't have to fully understand it yet, along and inside the type function and then the variable name. And then it'll just print out the data type, which is a float, as we already covered. Let me just clear this up, it's a bit distracting. Now, to reassign a variable to a new value, so for example, an enemy loses some health in a game that you're coding. Well, you can just type the same variable name, the reassignment operator, the same single equal sign, and then a new value, like this. And now, x has the value of 24 instead of 10. Now, let's talk about input and output. The print function, which you saw earlier, is how we output things to this terminal down here. You can print all the types of variables that we covered earlier. So for example, we can print x, or we can print y, like that. You can even make a new string inside the print statement instead of printing out an already initialized variable. So for example, we can print out the famous hello world within 2 quotation marks, and it prints like that. And while we will cover a more efficient way to do this in the next section, you can actually combine both a variable and a string inside the same print statement. So if I want to print my age, I can type I'm, then a comma, then the variable name x, then another comma, then years old. And this will type I'm 24 years old. It's important to consider when using this method of combining strings and variables that this comma has an implied space within it. And that means that you don't need to type a space here and here. If you do, the string just gets extra wide. You don't want that. Taking user input is done with the input method, which is just typed like this. Now, inside this input method, you can have something be printed out, and it's very useful because, for example, the user won't know what you want from them. So, for example, if you want them to enter their name into the terminal, you can type out enter your name inside this input brackets, and then it will print that out, and now the user knows, oh, I have to enter my name into the program, like that. But it's also important to consider that the input function always returns a string. So if you want it to return an integer or a float instead of a string, which can be useful for different reasons that you'll probably learn later on in this series, you can do it like this. Int, which converts it to an integer, and then do the input. And you can do the same method, but just type float to convert it into a float instead of an integer. That's input and output. And that process is known as casting, the one I just showed you. Finally, string manipulation and formatting. Since strings are so useful, such a useful data type to learn in Python, there's just many methods and things that you can do to manipulate these strings in certain ways to get the results you want in code. Strings are known as immutable, meaning you don't modify them directly, and there are many useful string operations, but some of the basic ones are the dot lower and dot upper methods. So if I want to create a new string from this old string that we already initialized, but I want it all in lowercase letters, we can do st.lower. Now let's print this out to see what it looks like. And then it's all in lowercase letters. Initially, this H was capitalized, but down here it's not. Or we can convert it all into uppercase letters. And now everything is uppercase. Another important string manipulation tactic, I guess you could say, you need to learn is known as string concatenation, which is basically when you add two strings together. So for example, you can add new string and the old string using this plus sign inside this print statement, and it'll add them both together and print as one string. Or you can store this inside a variable and then print that final variable and still get the same result of the two strings being added together. Now finally, string formatting. Remember in the second section when I taught you how to combine both strings and variables inside the print statement to output to the terminal? Well, there's actually a more elegant and faster way to do that rather than just using the commas. You can use something known as F strings. So the syntax for this is just a print statement that we already learned, then the letter F on its own, and then the two quotation marks that you would use for a string. So if I want to type the same, I'm 24 years old, I can do I'm, and then in curly brackets, the variable name, which would be X. And then years old, and let's see, we get the same thing. I'm 24 years old. This is just a way more elegant way to combine both strings and variables in the same print statement, and I guarantee you it will be very useful for you down the line in any projects you have to do. That's it. No BS, just Python. We covered variables, data types, input and output, and string manipulation in under 10 minutes. Next up, control flow with if-else statements and loops.